Hello everyone. This is another presentation on creating a CV, which is a which is needed to apply for jobs or higher education. And if you are, in a university doing a course, especially an undergraduate course, and you're nearing your graduation, and you're now looking at applying for various jobs or various universities for your master's program, then this is something that has to be a compulsory part of your application, something that you have to have, something that you really need to focus and invest a lot of efforts in creating this so that you present your application in the best way possible and you document all your achievements, qualifications in a proper format. Today, we are going to discuss how to sort of document all your past achievements, your graduation journey, especially when you're a fresher and or when you have a couple of jobs. So whether you are at the final stages of your graduation or whether you are at the final stages of your post graduation or even when you're not a fresher and you've had experiences in a couple of jobs, this video will be a quick refresher for you to sort of, especially when you're looking to update your CV. So whenever you're applying for a job, one thing you have to understand that in most of the situations, there would be hundreds of CVs that the recruiters will have to go through. And out of them, they will only have to select one. So one thing you have to remember is that you have to make your CV really concise. You really, it needs to be eye-catching. It needs to be relevant, and it needs to be very clear and something that has a very easy readability, so that you can, the person who is recruiting and who is doing the shortlisting process will be easily able to evaluate whether the CV that he or she is reading is it suited to that job vacancy that he or she is looking to recruit. According to a research done, a recruiter typically spends only 20 to 60 seconds on a resume. Imagine you are given only 1 minute to make a choice whether the resume in front of you can be shortlisted for a particular position or not. That is the amount of time that the recruiter has, and that is the amount of time that they will spend. The people with whom you'll be sharing a CV will either be a recruiter or will be a reference, and both of those categories of people are extremely busy. So you have to make sure that whatever you're trying to communicate through your CV goes across in a short span of time. Your CV is usually the first piece of communication that you will have with an organization or with a recruiting agency. Therefore, the kind of impression that you will make through that one piece of document and how well you are able to demonstrate the kind of person that you are, mostly on a professional level, talking about your qualifications, talking about your extracurricular activities, talking about the research projects, internships that you've done, and the kind of impression that you make, how much you're able to sell on your skills is what the deciding factor will be. And the CV is something that really helps the recruiter decide that. So first thing is that when you're an undergraduate student, that it's not like you've done a lot of jobs. So the material in that CV is not very extensive. Even then, how you present, what courses you've done, what internships you have gone to, what research projects you've done in a very coherent way is what will be the deciding factor. So the good presentation is the key there. The second thing to understand is that what is that the employer is looking for? What is it that the employer wants? Try to understand the job vacancy in a very cohesive way. Try to research the organization. Try to research the kind of job vacancies, the kind of industry that they operate in, and if you know people who already work in that organization or who have worked in that organization before, try to speak to them, try to have a very holistic understanding of the place that you are applying to, and eventually judging yourself to in terms of your suitability to that particular position is what will be very important. So you have to understand that, of course, you will have a standard CV that you will have always created for yourself. But even then, when you're actually applying for a particular position, you will have to come back to that document and tweak it according to the requirements of that internship or that research project or that job that you're applying to. So, in that case, it will be very important for you to understand the point of the resume. The next thing to understand is that what is it that you're actually looking to do next, and how will that piece of document help you to achieve that? So, do not, of course, there'll be a lot of templates available to you online, and but I thoroughly believe that you have to show a sense of creativeness when you are formulating a CV. It is usually to provide a sense of who you really are. So when a recruiter sees it, he or she should have an idea about the kind of person that you are, and only when they meet you in an interview, they'll be able to put a face to all the impression that they've already created in your mind, which perhaps they will have by then. So therefore, I do not advocate one format over the other. What format you will be using will be dependent upon, firstly, your level of experience, how much content you have to write in, how much content do you have that has to be written in a CV, whether you're applying for an industry position or an academic position. In industry or corporate jobs, they look for maximum CV of 2 pages. But if you're applying for an academic job, it must be much more. So you have to be unique, and you have to sort of show some form of creativeness. So, like I said, it's very important for you to understand that why are you wanting to do that particular job that you're applying for? Why did you choose that exact offer? And what is it that you're looking from that job? Why do you think that you are a good candidate for that particular job? In other words, to understand the point of the resume, to understand firstly that whether it is taking you in the right direction in which you want to develop yourself, also trying to have a holistic understanding of the recruiter in terms of who will read it, what is the position that you're applying for, and why you are writing that. Also, in creating the CV, it's very important for you to highlight the relevant things, show what the employer wants to see, and many times, in terms of what you have done, there'll be situations where you'll have to edit out your CV to highlight things that are more relevant to that particular position that you are wanting to apply for. So in that case, not all that you have done would be relevant, and this is a case when you're not a fresher and you've already worked in various corporations. So depending upon what is the destination, your CV will have to speak your motivations out in a written form. One very important question that often people think about is how long should my CV be? Most of the time, speaking in a very generic term, overlong CVs indicate a lack of focus and an insecurity. It clearly shows that you are going on and on without having a clear focus on what you want your CV to exhibit, or what your focus in your job search is. Ideally, like I mentioned, when you are looking at applying for jobs in an industry, your CV should not be longer than 2 pages. And often, research in human resources has proven there are a lot of journals that talk about recruitment and impression formation during recruitment. And according to that, the page one of a CV is something that matters the most, because by the time a recruiter will have gone through the first page of a resume, the decision most of the times will have already been made. But if for if you have a good reason for writing more things in a CV, and if in that case it's better to extend a CV to the third page rather than cramming everything and losing valuable white space. So as much as it's important for you to have a short and concise CV, it's also uh, it's also very important to make sure that you are not cramming too much in that 1 or 2 pages, and there should be significant amount of white space that should be there in the CV, which means that space that is not occupied by words in your CV. So there should be much balance between the words and the white space in a particular document. And what this is something that I've also talked about in the previous slide. and that is that you have to be guided by what is the norm in a sector. For example, if you're an academic person, if you've done your master's, if you've done your PhD, your academic CV is will be much longer because it will consist of list of publications, it will consist of a list of conferences that you've gone to, and it will consist of your conference proceedings, and you'll have much more to write because of the nature of your work. But if it's a CV in a marketing position in an organization, it will rarely be more than 2 pages. And according to a norm in recruitment, that if shorter the CV, the more work you've done on the CV. So it's not that if your CV is short, it doesn't mean that you haven't worked hard on creating the right CV. It means that you've worked enough to edit only the relevant information into your document, and you've worked a lot on shortening your CV and making it more concise. Now I'll be sharing a few miscellaneous tips, some of which you would already know, but this is a good opportunity for all of us to refresh what we know about CV and to remember these small things, which may have a huge impact on our job recruitment process. Firstly, when you submit a CV electronically, you would obviously name your file something in your own system. Make sure that your CV is not titled as just CV. So that is the first thing you need to remember. Many people submit CVs over emails and over electronic submission systems, and the file is always named as just CV. So make sure you don't do that, and make sure you label the file as your name. Secondly, many people give their CV's name of John Admin CV 2013. So they write their name and they write CV and they write the year in which that CV is being formulated. This is a very common practice, but according to researchers and practitioners, this might pose that you have been in the job market for too long and may not be the right impression to give in a lot of situations. Therefore, the best safe option is to just name your CV as your name. Second thing is that please have a professional email ID. Many people have very, bizarre, unprofessional email IDs, like so and so rocks and things like that. Those are email IDs. It might look funny, but it is something that is a common practice, and many people apply to various jobs using such IDs. Make sure you don't use such IDs and you have a professional sounding email address. If not, always make a new one. Third thing is to always explain undigested jargon or complicated terminology in a CV, especially the job titles. Many times, because of the country that you're working in and because of the industry and the sector that you're working in, your job title may not be easily comprehensible to others, especially when you're working in a startup organizations, which is what mostly you people will have, uh, and which is what you may have done internships in, and they may give you very unconventional designations which are not very common. So therefore, depending upon the industry that you're applying to, depending upon the market that you're applying to, make sure that your job title is something that can easily portray what your job role in that particular organization will be like. For example, a starting academic position after a PhD in India is known as assistant professor, but the same position on the same level and scale is known as a lecturer in Europe. It means the same thing, but sometimes people may not be aware of that. So therefore, if you are in the Europe and you want to move back to India and you are moving back, and your last job in Europe was that of a lecturer, make sure that you're writing in brackets what that means in the industry that you're applying to. So make sure this is just an example in terms of the geographical territory, but also especially when you're working in very startup sort of organizations, they may give you very you know uh, unconventional job title, which may be just part of their culture. In those cases as well, make sure that you're explaining your job title. Always communicate in the simplest language that you can, and short words work the best. Vary the length of the bullet points from the top to the bottom of the list. In a particular paragraph or a particular section, if you have a lot of bullet points, make sure that they vary. They are of different lengths. That may just improve the readability. If you try it, you'll understand what this means. Always put the strongest statement and statement that has the maximum impact according to you at the beginning of each paragraph or at the beginning of each set of bullet points. Avoid repetition of words in the same bullet point. Always, like I said, be consistent, be brief, and be focused. A few other miscellaneous tips that I would like to summarize in front of you. Firstly, like I said, communicate in the simplest language you can. Short words work best. Vary the length of bullet points. Uh, Mixing long and short sentences to create variety and white space is something that you should aim at. Put your strongest bullet point at the top or bottom of a list. Put the strongest statement at the beginning of each paragraph or bullet point. Avoid repetition of words in the same bullet point. Link your skill or achievement to a particular job or organization to give it context. The next thing is to include tangible measures of achievement. This might not be relevant to you if you're a fresher, but even if you are applying to a fresher position, and even if you've just been a student, even then there might be some situations. For example, you may be a part of a committee, you may be part of a society in your university, for example public and media relations. In that also, if you're including some tangible measures of achievement, for example, handled a team of 20 members is something that you are, it's something that is having a tangible measure of achievement. Organized 20 conferences, that is also a tangible measure of achievement. Organized 20 social events and procured media partners for the same. So that is also a tangible measure of achievement, something that gives a clear idea about what was the quantity of work you did, and something that also depicts the quality of work that you did. So always include tangible measures of achievement. The next thing that I want to say is that tighten up the language to convey maximum information in the shortest space without a document being uncomfortably abbreviated and overwritten. So then some sentences, so you do not have to write complete sentences almost. You can also write short phrases to depict what you did in that particular role. For example, if you're writing about what you did in a particular internship, you do not have, in every bullet point that you're writing about your role in that internship, you do not have to be very descriptive and write full sentences, but you can use phrases that are coherent and that say enough for the reader to understand what you did in that. The last thing that I would like to say is that, when you're writing an email, your way of writing, your way of communicating is very concise and formal, rather than when you're speaking to someone on the phone or when you're texting someone on WhatsApp or on messaging apps. So therefore, your approach of communication in while formulating a CV has to be email concise rather than text speak. Always make sure that you're writing concise sentences and you're writing it in a professional way, similar to how you would draft a professional email to your colleagues or your boss, and not like how you would text your personal acquaintances over messaging apps. Okay, so some more miscellaneous tips that I would like to give you is that many times when you are formulating a CV, you will notice that you may not have necessarily worked with really well-known organizations. For example, organizations that are in Forbes list, or organizations that are world-known like Google, Facebook, Microsoft. There might be many startups that you may have worked in, or there might be many SME, small medium size enterprises that you may have worked with, or there may be many family businesses that you may have worked with, and your role there might be uh, equally validating and might be very important. Those organizations may be brilliant places to work at, but people may not be stereotypically that much aware about them. In that case, try to write a line or two about the organization so that the person gets an idea about the kind of organizations that you've worked in. The second point that I would like to say is that do not keep listing the same skill repeatedly over several jobs, and try to phrase maximum details in the most recent job. For example, if you've worked in 4 internships and make sure in that case the internship that was the latest is what is having the maximum information. And when you're writing about the skills that you gained at each of those internships, make sure that the sentences are not very similar sounding. Make sure that you're writing exactly what you did in those internships, how you brought value to the organization, what exactly you did, rather than mentioning the same skills in a very generic CV cliche statements in each of those job roles that you're mentioning about. The third thing I would like to say is that do not keep listing routine skills. For example, displaying teamwork. Many people write statements like this. But what does it mean? And how do you know that you display teamwork? Which is the measure by which you are judging yourself? So try to write exactly what you did in that particular project or job or internships, rather than writing very generic statements that are quite repeated in all the roles that you're mentioning about. Also, depending upon the role that you're applying for, many times recruiters search for phrases. They do a control F on the document and they find various phrases that they are looking for. For example, it might be a software that they want their prospective candidate to be proficient in, or it might be other keywords. So make sure your CV includes relevant keywords or phrases that might be hunted if your CV was being scanned electronically. So always have that thing in mind. The fifth tip I have for you here is very simple, but it is something that happens often. At the top of the CV, please do not write curriculum vitae or CV. We all know that it is CV, so you do not need to give that heading. You can straight away start with your name. The sixth point is that do not write justify your CV. So when you're creating a CV on a Word document, there is a option on Word to justify your CV, either left justification or center justification or right justification. Try to keep left or center justification. Do not write justify your CV. The seventh statement that I want to make is that use section headings, of course, for example, scholarships, internships, etc. But do not include headings or elements which are too obvious. For example, when you're writing your name and on the below that you're writing your email and your phone number, you do not necessarily have to write phone number. You do not have to necessarily write your email and then your email address. You can directly write your email address and your phone number wherever you're giving your personal contact details. You do not have to label elements in your CV which are too obvious to understand as to what they are and what section do they fall under. The eighth point is that check that you have sufficient white space, which means that the space in a Word document that do not have any words. So try to edit out in a way that that your CV has sufficient white space, and do not try to squeeze too much information on one page. The ninth statement is that double check spellings, particularly the names of the organization and some technical information, for example, softwares or various technical things that you may want to write about. So make sure you do a proper spelling check on your CV, because a spelling mistake, although might be a small mistake, but it might just put off the recruiter or might not give the right impression of you having attention to detail, which is very important. So this brings me to the end of the first video on CV making, which is very generic, which just aimed to start the discussion on this topic. Please subscribe, like, and share this channel, and please follow us to know more about how to create CV and to watch more interesting content on science, experiments, maths, and English, and various other topics. There is a lot of interesting content which will brew here, and make sure you're subscribed. Thank you so much.